So the work that we did was, as I said, essentially removing some of the fear and barriers for big data. So it was proving. So what they got out of it was really just removing a roadblock to the next stage, and it was about proving that the value could be liberated from the data, if you like, and that the technology machinery was not a barrier. So and that the costs weren't a barrier, which is why I was talking about price performance, but also how long it took us to do it, and so on. So then the next phase from that is, so that was really the discovery of the two phases I talked about earlier. That was the discovery phase, or the first round of the discovery phase. So we've then moved on to, and when we've quoted for the productionisation of that. But I think the business questions that will be asked would be refined over time. So it's not about having the right answers on day one. It's about having the machinery to support that sort of scientific method of hunting and refining. That was the important thing to prove.
I mean, I think that's going to be an endless arms race, and there's so first let me say I think that the perception of privacy and security is changing dramatically. In fact, there's another Dilbert in another part of my talk where there's a guy being interviewed, and the interviewee says, "You don't have a Facebook profile and a LinkedIn profile, and you're not on Twitter." And the interviewee responds, "I'm focused on my work." And the interviewer says, "I think you're dead." And we're entering a phase where, like, we generationally might feel that the younger generation is oversharing and there's too much information and blah, blah, blah. But the perception is actually the reverse with a lot of them. They think that they need a presence there, that to participate, they need a presence there. And actually, as the cartoon suggests, you're in a phase where if you're not participating with us, if you're not in the network and sharing even at a base level, like, what's up? Like, something's like, have you been in prison? Like, what? There's questions about, like, why are you not engaged in the social milieu that the rest of us are? And so I think sharing and privacy as a bar where we might have perceived it in the past is moved a lot. And then the security aspect of it in terms of identification, authentication, and knowing your customer and AML and all that other stuff, I think that's just going to be something that we're going to continue to wrestle with. Encryption is going to increase and get better, but then the computer's going to get better and more powerful, and it's kind of an endless arms race. I don't know that it's possible to avoid it. Like, you could not have a mobile phone, not have an email address, and maybe get through your professional life, but I question if you could. And if you have either of those things, then you're, I was just talking to Trudy, like, we're chipped. Everyone's been chipped. Your SIM card is unique to you on the planet. They know where you are and when you are, and that's not going to change unless you unplug and destroy your SIM card, so it's hard to debate.
I haven't upgraded to it yet, largely because the feedback in the office has been negative, to say the least, about what they've done to the user interface for that. I don't know what the reaction is worldwide on that now. They seem to innovate with that version. I don't think so. It didn't feel like innovation. And I think the scary thing was how many things they brought forward in front of the lock screen now. The amount of stuff that you can do without even unlocking the phone seemed to me to really sort of open stuff up that I perhaps wouldn't want to have opened up, and yet there seems to be no mechanism to shut that off. I had no option to say I don't want that visible at that point now. So, yeah, maybe another level of locking is going to be required before I feel safe to upgrade to iOS 7. Plus, I have to delete my stuff first in order to install the damn thing. So, yeah.
I just received some advice from a colleague the other day who beat me to the update, and he said his iPad updated fine, and he said don't touch it with a barge pole. Make sure you got your backups all done, because he had a nightmare on his iPhone. So then I thought, I'll get to that later, because my life's not really crying out for it this week. And I suppose that's kind of how I feel about it. The differences are relatively incremental. I think that, but kind of interesting, in the little features. I think that the market, the way the market, that Apple's kind of totally dominated the market a while back, or BlackBerry before that. The speed at which the competitive forces come to apply to the suppliers is frightening, really, now. And what seems a completely dominant supplier at one point can very quickly essentially lose the plot. That's the thing that I think really strikes me about that. I mean, we talk about pace of change in lots of ways, but that's really quite astonishing, I think. So, you're only one release away from bankruptcy, it seems, if you have a bad one.
Yeah, and the only comment I'd say is I think that Apple has the bit of the curse of success. So when the first iPhone came out and I picked it up, I was one of a small group of early adopters who thought it was interesting and cool and different. And now, if you look at Android fragmentation of updates, it's massive. Like, there's still a ton of people. It's like 25-30% of people on 4 versions ago for Android. Whereas iOS 7 comes out, it's like 65% of people update within the 2 days it was released or something like that, So you look at the bell curve of like early adopters and then the mass adopters and then the laggards and everything. Within 2 days, they're past the mean. Like, they've got like everybody upgrading. And when you do something radically different and you change paradigms and you move away from skeuomorphic stuff so it looks like a yellow pad and it looks like a phone and you move to a more flat interface, I would expect that to start with early adopters and go around. But with Apple, everyone just moves en masse. So you have people who aren't early adopters having a jarring experience going, this is not like my old iPhone. And it's sort of the curse of success, where, if it went in the normal way where you started with early adopters and then you moved into mass market over time, it probably would go better. But you're right, the feedback to iOS 7 has been mixed at best, where I'd say early adopters who maybe are coming off a jailbroken iPhone or have an Android and an iPhone think it's an improvement and like it and blah, blah, blah. But a lot of the mass market people, and my wife's a good example, she's like, what happened to, how do you now do, all this kind of, because stuff has changed. And when you become a mass market supplier, changing stuff is a risky it's a risky endeavor. So, there's no way around it. That's just the reality of the situation. So yeah, I think there's a lot of people raising those questions. I don't think that there's anybody attempting to slow things down as a result of the questions. So there's definitely a cultural debate going on about continuous connectivity, about multiple screens, about people sitting around a table eating together, but everyone's on their own device, no one's looking at each other. There was a viral video on YouTube that was created recently about this phenomenon, that this woman did this video of all of these social events, a picnic, out to drinks, at a party, like all these social events where everyone was on their device. And often communicating with the person next to them, but via the device, And so there's definitely a recognition and a concern out there, but I don't see any significant motion to change anything as a result of that. Maybe you can't. Well, and which is why I use the wave metaphor. Like, yeah, you can step out there and see if you can stop that wave, but good luck with that. I mean, I'd rather learn to surf, I think.
No, I don't really worry about the ethics. So, as in, I guess I don't feel that we can sit, we can't really influence them, and I suppose also I feel that on the subjects we've discussed today anyway, which is kind of the enterprise big data adoption, there's lots of organisational barriers to adoption that for me are much, keep me awake at night much more than that. And also there's typically very strong internal security and governance processes in the enterprise we work in. So it's, it's almost the opposite problem. And so in terms of exploiting, using customer data and those kind of things, and privacy and all those aspects, those are key concerns that we have to work with. And it's not. I don't feel like we're being fast and loose in any respect at all. If anything, I think all our customers are very, very cautious, typically. But it's maybe the markets we operate in.
My wife works in adoption and social services sort of area to do with children, and there's quite a big concern there that children are engaging in the sort of the network in such a way that it's placing them in danger. And I think that is an area that we should be truly concerned about. I mean, once you're an adult, sure, if you want to give up your information, if you want to do that, then that's up to you. And and commercially, it should be okay to exploit that with your permission. But with kids, they give the permission without realising the consequences of giving that permission. And I think we should be taking that more seriously. I don't know how we do it, but as a job as testers, maybe something we should be thinking about is how do we police who's the age of the people using these devices out there, and whether they should be doing what they're doing.
So there was I guess most of you guys are familiar with Gartner reports, and Gartner have this magic quadrant that they issue, I think, once a year. So they have a magic quadrant, which is basically their rating of all the vendors in a particular sector, like hosting or application development or whatever it might be. So they released the magic quadrant for infrastructure as a service relatively recently, and Lydia, the author, so what they brought out is the thing that really startled me. So firstly, Amazon are kind of top right, which is the best place where all the vendors want to be. So no great shocks there. So they've got the richest offering. But it was the capacity part that really amazed me. So there's something in the report around, I can't remember the exact numbers, but it's something like Amazon have got 10 times the cloud data center capacity of the next 10 or 15 players added together. It's just phenomenal. And I may have slightly exaggerated that, but it's one of those things that it was huge, whichever exaggeration I applied to it. So those next 10, 15 players was Microsoft Azure, Google, IBM, right? We're not talking about minnows as well as Rackspace. I suppose coming back to my previous point about how it's amazing how quickly the kind of shine has come off the apple, and that they're now it seems to be completely unbeatable now. There's some signs of potential weakness and questions being asked. I guess that could happen to Amazon, but they've shown such an incredible pace of innovation and keeping that up, that they're outstripping the competition. I think the other flip side to that though is that the other cloud providers' offerings are still nowhere near as strong, but they're reaching the stage of probably good enough, if you know what I mean. So for the majority, or at least for a significant proportion of use cases, so for dev and test workloads and so on, it's getting to the point where, so I was talking to a customer yesterday where they've gone with Microsoft Azure, primarily for kind of organisational reasons. They have a strong relationship with Microsoft, they've got a lot of Microsoft developers, and they had an enterprise agreement with Microsoft, so it was just an easier path for them. But they still accept that it's not as strong an offering as AWS. But to be honest, I think the people I was dealing with don't have the organisational will to fight that. Right? So so their kind of strategy was, we'll settle for second best. So I think the interesting thing will be how the cloud market plays out in terms of the extra functionality that the market leaders like AWS have to offer, how important that is to customers going forward. I think in terms of price, I suppose the other thing to talk about is in terms of price, it's clearly just been a race to the bottom between Amazon, Microsoft and Google. In fact, Microsoft have, I don't know if you're aware, but Microsoft committed to match, I think it was Amazon and Google's prices for the next certain time period. So actually, it's like as I describe it, a supermarket price promise from Microsoft. So that but it's just like the three or four big boys just beating up even anybody else who's even enormous, like Rackspace, just totally squeezing them out of the market in the next year or two. That's my guess. Then what will be interesting, just to wrap that up, would be when the smaller players, or the huge but relatively smaller players, have been driven out of the market, does the price start creeping up? That's the thing that'll be interesting in, say, 2 years out.